Welcome to a new daily top Askreddit video. Today's topic: who is the biggest troll in history? I forget the name, but that one guy from the 1800s who bought specific tickets to a play and then gave them away to bald men on the street so that when everyone took their seats and the bald men's heads reflected the light from the stage, they spelled out fuck as seen from the stage. Please tell me you have a source on this. His name was Horace D. Virchow. Other pranks attributed to him included walking around the streets of London with a cow's udder poking through the fly of his trousers, and cutting it off with a pair of scissors when he judged he had caused maximum outrage. Depositing a load of horse manure in Venice's Piazza San Marco, which cannot be reached by horses. He was in Venice for his honeymoon at the time. Hosting a lavish party at which the attendees eventually realized that all their surnames contained the word bottom. Some sources state that the theatre prank actually spelled out bollocks, and it's possible he may have done it more than once. Theodore Hook, the perpetrator of the Berners Street hoax in London in 1810, in which Cook sent thousands of letters summoning all manners of various vendors and service people and physicians and dignitaries and others to all come to one random person's home, literally shutting down a large part of London as they all descended upon the same address throughout the day, all while Cook and a friend sat watching from a house across the street, presumably laughing their asses off the whole time. Don't undersell how crazy this was. I thought this was just the 1810 equivalent of pranking a bunch of pizza companies, but after reading the wiki I realized this guy was on a whole other level. Get tag wedding cakes delivered. Convincing the Mayor of London to turn up. 12 pianos. 12. The Archbishop of Canterbury. Even priests expecting to deliver someone's last rites. Personally I think the priests was a bit far, but it was the pianos that were key for me. I dunno, with 12 odds are good that one will be off key. This Chinese general whose city was besieged by a much larger army, so he opened the main gate and sat atop it playing his flute. The enemy thought it was a trap, so they packed their stuff and left. Zedong. Magnificent bastard was so feared as a strategist and tactician, he was allegedly carried onto the battlefield posthumously, and the opposing army, despite knowing he was already dead, decided they couldn't take the chance he had some sneaky shit in the works for them. Edit. First gold. Thank you, kind stranger, this is a good week for me. Zedong, the type of dude to stuff his body full of nitroglycerine and wait for the enemy general to perform a celebratory punch to his explosive nuts. A true champion of siege. This is the second time I am posting this correction on an Askreddit thread, no complaints. It wasn't a flute, it's most commonly referred to in English sources as a lute. However, it's not a lute either, it's a gukui, which is a type of Chinese 7-string zither. The reason it's referred to as a lute is because the Dutch sinologist Robert van Gulik wrote a book about the gukui called The Law of the Chinese Lute. Yes, I understand now. It was a violin. If I remember correctly, that's advice from The Art of War. Audacity and nonchalance as a method to counter an overwhelming force. I don't know about The Art of War, but it is mentioned in another ancient Chinese strategy guide, the 36 Stratagems, where it is called the empty fort strategy. Basically, if you act calm and harmless, they will think you're luring them into an ambush, and run away. It can also be used to actually lure your enemy into an ambush by making them think you're just trying to make them think you're luring them into an ambush. Effective against opponents who are prone to overthinking. Eric the Red. He wanted people to come and live in his newfound ice-covered land, so he named it Greenland. Hey, I heard there's this even better place, called Wheelad, just a bit further. There's a belief to why it was named Vilad, that's not due to trickery though. When first settled, the climate was very different, much warmer and had an abundant yield of grapes, therefore the name. I remember reading that during the same time England also had great amount of grapes. But climate changed drastically and the area was forced to be abandoned, and Icelanders had to adapt to living in harsher and colder weather. Now I'm not a scientist and you should do your own research before settling with my expletios though. Diogenes. He became notorious for his philosophical stunts, such as carrying a lamp during the day, claiming to be looking for an honest man. He criticized Plato, disputed his interpretation of Socrates, and sabotaged his lectures, sometimes distracting listeners by bringing food and eating during the discussions. Diogenes was also noted for having mocked Alexander the Great, both in public and to his face when he visited Corinth in 336 BC. Came here to say this. This guy is so well known for trolling that people are still talking about it nearly 2500 years later. I think he'd be proud of that. Alexander himself seemed amused at how few fucks Diogenes had to give. You've clearly got some balls if you've managed to impress the guy that conquered like half the civilized world at the time. Were I not Alexander the Great, I'd want to be Diogenes. To which Diogenes responded, were I not Diogenes, I too would want to be Diogenes. My favorite Diogenes story. Diogenes stood outside a whorehouse yelling insults at the customers for visiting women of ill repute. They began giving him small coins to shut him up. When he collected enough coins he went in the whorehouse. And once when he saw the son of a whore throwing rocks into a crowd he said, take care you don't hit your father. My man. The motherfucker who sold the Eiffel Tower twice. To be honest, his advice seems great for sales. Lustig's 10 Commandments of the Con. Be a patient listener, it is this, not fast talking, that gets a con man his coups. Never look bored. Wait for the other person to reveal any political opinions, then agree with them. Let the other person reveal religious views, then have the same ones. Hint at sex talk, but don't follow it up unless the other fellow shows a strong interest. Never discuss illness, unless some special concern is shown. Never pry into a person's personal circumstances, they'll tell you all eventually. Never boast. Just let your importance be quietly obvious. Never be untidy. Never get drunk. Sounds like my therapist is a con artist. Bad enough I fell for it once, but even worse he fell for it twice. BTW, does anybody wanna buy the Eiffel Tower? PM me for price. Edit, BTW people, I'm getting some offers on my PM, so get it while it's hot. Delivery to be arranged only after payment in Bitcoin has been completed. Too many scammers out there and I won't take any chances since this is the original Eiffel Tower. There was a Prussian, I can't remember his name, who managed to make an officer uniform out of scraps of clothing. He used it to convince a few guards on patrol to follow him into a government building, ordered the arrest of the man in charge, confiscated all the money personally, sent the arrested man to Berlin, claiming it was all on order of the king. He then ditched the uniformed, got on a train to Berlin and managed to beat the guards there. He then sat back and watched the absolute confusion happen. The guy was eventually arrested, but the public turned him into a celebrity and his actions into a play that was performed all over Germany. He wasn't incarcerated for long, and after his release he lived an easy life from there on. The Kaiser even was proud for this to happen because it showed how much the people trusted the authorities. He's called the Hauptmann von Kopeick. Mozart didn't like this singer so much that he wrote a piece for her with high and low notes constantly, because he noticed that when she hit low notes her chin went to her chest, and when she hit high notes her head would fling back. So it was like she was bobbing like a chicken. Classic composers had good sense of humor. Mozart's contemporary Joseph Haydn was conductor under a noble for a long time. But his employer never gave Haydn and his orchestra vacation. So as a sign of protest he made this symphony in which orchestra members leave mid-song section by section. Edit, my first silver, thanks a lot random redditor. Edit 2, thank you for the gold. Made my gloomy day in Georgia to be bright one. April Fool's Day 1974, when a man burned 70 rubber tires on a dormant volcano in Alaska. This has to be up there. He waited 3 years to get a helicopter to fly the tires to the top to get a picture-perfect condition. He even got the Coast Guard called out too, and here's the link to the story. http://hoaxes.org/f_database/permalik. Porky's favorite response to the prank came in 1980. He received a letter from an attorney in Denver, inside of which was a clipping from the Denver Post with a photo of Mount St. Helens erupting. Attached was a note that read, "This time, you little bastard, you've gone too far." Amazing. When he woke that morning on April the 1st, he looked out his window and could see right across the sound. So he looked at his wife, Patty, and said, "I have to go do it today." She replied, "Just don't make an ass of yourself." Best part of the article, haha. My favorite part about this is their names. Husband and wife, Porky and Patty. The guy who opened a fake No-One restaurant in London using Google reviews and his back garden and shed with microwave meals. That was incredible. He also faked his way into Paris Fashion Show as a designer with knockoff clothes. Then whenever people around the world want to interview him about these things, he sends lookalikes instead. It must be quite exhausting knowing him. He did this to prove that TripAdvisor was a load of shit when it comes to recommendations, because restaurants could just fake their way to the top. While TripAdvisor did acknowledge that he was able to game the system, they maintained that using fake reviews is still not a viable business tactic because real customers would eventually show up and write honest reviews of the place that would balance or even override the fake ones. They have a point. The journalists' plan worked because no one ever got to go to the fake restaurant until the very end of the stunt, so all the reviews could be faked. As a prank, it worked. But if he were a real restaurant owner trying to attract business, it would have likely failed unless the experience was any good. Edit, since I don't have the time to debate every single person calling me a corporate shill for just restating the official stance of a company that was basically trolled by Vice to prove a dubious point, if you still have doubts, here is something that should clear it up a bit more.